Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Hausfrau. Today I wanted to share with you my very simple but very delicious recipe for homemade beef stock. Now, we are 6 people, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, myself and my partner, and we really don't eat that much meat. We buy 1/4 of a cow, and that lasts us the entire year. So we really have a pretty minimal amount of meat in our diet. The only meat that we're willing to consume is meat that was raised in an ethical fashion and animals, livestock that lived a good, happy life. So that means because those kinds of regeneratively and ethically produced meat are more expensive, we don't eat very much of them. But we do purchase 1/4 of a cow every year from a local farmer, and that has to last. So I use every part of our share, including all of the bones. One of the good things about getting your own cow share is that the bones are often really meaty and rich, and there's all that good bone marrow in them, and they make fantastic stock. Now, I know maybe like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, bone broth was all the rage in kind of every crunchy mom circle, every kind of ethical eating circle, kind of wellness circle. Bone broth is really just stock. It's just a fancy rebranding of stock. And that's when you cook right the bones and get all and little scraps of meat and get all of the goodness out of them. And I feel like there's so much nutrition there. If you add a little bit of acid when you are cooking your stock, it helps leach extra calcium out of the bones. And I found that many recipes for stock can vary in subtle ways that really impacts the flavor. And this is what I've found over 20 years of making stock, actually more than that because my mom used to have me make it when I was a kid, of making stock, what I feel brings out the greatest, most complex and delicious flavor profile. So let me share my recipe here with you. Years and years ago, I read in Cook's Illustrated magazine that roasting your bones before you make stock drastically improves the flavor, and I have found that absolutely to be true. I only add 3 ingredients as a rub to my beef bones before roasting them in the oven. I use pink Himalayan salt, crushed black pepper, and smoked Spanish paprika in equal quantities. Here I am taking the rub and liberally coating 4 pounds of grass-fed, grass-finished beef bones. You can see that the bones from our cow share are always really, really meaty, but don't worry, none of that will go to waste. I'm always excited to see lots of marrow and lots of good, rich, grass-fed fat on my beef bones. Both of them will add lots of fat and nutrition to the dish itself. Growing kids need fat. I've never understood the modern trend to eat a super low-fat diet. Our ancestors never did, and fat is very nourishing, especially when it comes from a cow that has lived like a cow. It's impossible to cook meat in my kitchen without having 2 poodles flanking me. Please remember that cooked bones should never be fed to dogs as they are brittle and can cause splinters and internal damage. So don't worry, my dogs won't be getting any cooked bones, but they did get some little bits of cooked meat at the end. After thoroughly making sure that all sides of the bones are coated in the spice rub, I popped the bones into a 350-degree oven for about 40 minutes, turning them every 15 to 20 minutes until they were nicely browned. Here I am at the halfway point, flipping the bones over. You can see the rich caramelization starting to occur on the meat. This is what gives your beef stock all of that extra oomph of flavor. Making sure the bones are nice and brown and have that rich caramel color imparts so much more flavor to the stock. You can really, really taste the difference in the end result, and it's worth the extra time to pre-roast your bones for a much more sophisticated broth at the end. After the bones are nice and roasted and have a rich caramel color, it's time to pull out the crock pot or instant pot and make our stock. To the bones in the crock pot, I add 1 peeled carrot, 1 quartered onion, 1 bay leaf, and a half dozen prunes. I find prunes are a secret ingredient in adding a little layer of sweetness to the broth as well as imparting more nutrition. Acid helps leach more calcium out of the bones, so I also add 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Next, add water to just cover the contents of the pot. It really is important not to add too much water here so that our final broth is really rich. Don't water it down. Don't be tempted to try and thin it out too much. I've found that it takes a minimum of 10 hours for all of those flavors to marry nicely. I typically run my crock pot overnight. After 10 hours, the stock is strained into jars and put in the refrigerator. The rich yellow fat will rise to the top. It's a really good fat for frying vegetables, or you can leave it in the broth itself. It will add a richness to it as you heat up the stock. Now, the stock itself is full of gelatin. It's very thick from all of the goodness that was leached out of the bones by adding that extra bit of acid and cooking for a long period of time. As I said, you can scrape off the fat that rises to the top and save it for sauteing your onions and green beans, or use it in the stock itself. We took 1 of the 2 jars of stock from this recipe and the scraps of beef from the bones and made a delicious dinner of beef and barley soup the next night. Your finished stock will keep in the refrigerator for a few days or can be frozen. So thanks for watching today. I hope that you got something out of this video. I hope that you find all kinds of creative ways to use the delicious, nutritious beef stock that you make for your family, be it in lentil soup or beef stew, or just one of my favorite ways is a mug of hot broth on a really chilly early morning. If it's all frosty out after I've let out the ducks and chickens, I will go and just heat up a mug of broth and have that for my breakfast in front of the wood stove. It's so nourishing and delicious. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out my Patreon down in the description. None of the videos on this channel are monetized yet, and that's because I need like about 2,000 more view hours in order for YouTube to monetize. So if you are interested in supporting the work of this channel, you can check out my Patreon or just share it with your friends. The more view hours, the better. I will be back next week for sure, but probably midweek with another video. Thanks.